Hello and welcome to this week's version of the Watson Weekend, your weekly dose of e-commerce entertainment. I'm your host, Rick Watson.
Hi, it's Jessica Lisewski. Happy Friday. We made it.
Friday, we are here, and it looks like you're in a new location. Is something going on at the Lisewski household?
Yeah, sure. Well, not at my household, but my neighbor's household. So you guys get a tour of my living room / den today because,
Love it.
all the walls came down in my house on the downstairs floor. We moved in. Open concept is in, people. So yeah, they're building a pool and they've been drilling for about a week straight right by my office, which is where I usually podcast from, and you could hear it pretty loudly. So Rick and our producer Vinny said it needed to find a new location, but everyone gets a trip to the pool. So win-win for everybody.
Drill, baby, drill. That's what I'm saying.
Drill, baby, drill. That's what's happening over here.
That's scary. No, we are excited about the show. We have a number of topics. So we're going to talk about eBay, NRF shrinkflation, Dave Clark's new startup, Walmart, the state of the venture capital market, and then we have a very special guest.
Cannot wait. Yeah, we are going to unpack some pretty meaty topics after we get through our headline hangover. Just little things like privacy and monopolies and antitrust. Yeah. It's just a few little topics, but here we go. So we also want to thank our sponsors, VTEX. They're helping us bring this show to you today. VTEX, any friend of Magic Johnson is a friend of ours. You get that joke, Rick?
They had a fun, yeah, exactly. They had a fun conference earlier this year for NRF in New York City where they had Magic Johnson, and it was, if you've ever seen some of the, and we've had Mariano and others on the show that show the VTEX event in, I think, Sao Paulo, and it's just crazy.
They know how to throw a party.
They know how to throw a party. It's ridiculous. And yeah.
I mean, you get asked a lot, like what conferences to go to, and I think that one needs to be on the list.
Yeah, I would encourage you to be there. It's not the normal e-commerce event, put it that way.
It is not. It'll kind of rock your socks off, which is probably what we need, a little bit of a shake up here and there. All right. So you want to kick us off in what some of the hottest headlines were this week that caught your attention?
Yes, we are heading into our headline hangover where we review the news and events of the last weeks and month. The first one we are going to dive into is eBay, and frankly, a number of other marketplaces as well that are shifting from seller fees to buyer fees, particularly in apparel type categories. And so we've seen this happen. eBay tested it in Germany. We've seen it with Poshmark, Depop, which is owned by Etsy. I always keep forgetting that. Vinted is another new startup which has kind of the same thing. And what's happening is that even Amazon reduced their apparel fees. And so fees which used to be charged to the seller are now being charged to the buyer. The question is, like, who thinks this is a good idea? eBay is sort of like playing follow the leader, and they've done their own testing as well, so it must do something for them. Is this going to work, Jess?
I don't think so. That's kind of like someone like Kroger or Harris Teeter. Hey, we want you to come and shop in our store, but you got to pay the club fee to get in, and then you get to like dance with the DJ and while you shop for your sweet potatoes. But so no, I don't think this is going to work. I question the logic here because we are in this pressured economy. We've talked about the wallets being decreased, and in this type of scenario, we're saying, hey, people will just pony up some dollars to shop. I don't think that works.
First of all, impressive reference to sweet potato shopping here. I think this is a first on the Watson Weekend.
Yeah.
I also think that, to kind of follow on your point, you like solve one problem, like, okay, you make sellers a little bit happier, but you're like creating another problem, which is conversion. Ultimately, what drives the marketplace?
People buying.
Yeah, your buyers. And that's key to the flywheel. I mean, Amazon has made a business with respect to our a lot of respect and deference to our guest here who spent a lot of time at Amazon screwing over sellers to help buyers. And I didn't say that out loud. It's just the two of us.
No. Again, your margin is their opportunity. I guess it's just it's a difference of being in your face and charging the buyer versus you just stuff a bunch of fees that somehow end up trickling down into prices that end up still being passed on to the buyer. So transparency, people, it's
Yeah.
transparent.
So that's the eBay fee story. Next up, I think you have something for us with shrink and NRF trying not to make shrink a thing.
Yeah, exactly. If you guys are getting my reference, it is Mean Girls. We are not going to try to make shrink a thing after years of trying to make shrink a thing. So, just to take us back in time in our little time machine, it has been years and years, decades and decades of the NRF trying to convince the world that shrink is the retail boogeyman. It
Hmm.
pops up. There's nothing you can do about it. We need the government to step in. And, in turn, we've seen more and more merchandise being locked up. And it's created one of the largest friction points to probably what should be an in-store advantage for most, which is convenience, speed, grab and go,
Hmm.
especially in like the pharmacy business. And I know, Rick, you love to hop into a Dwayne Reed and ask someone to unlock 10 different
Ugh,
cases to get a toothbrush, deodorant, and some body wash and some hair gel because you got to keep that fro
yeah,
flowing.
got to keep the fro
So
flowing.
yeah. So here's kind of what's happened. And it's almost like this bit of an expose.
Hmm.
Hats off to Retail Dive for unlocking this. The headline is the NRF is they're not going to do their
Hmm.
annual report on shrink after more than 30 years
Hmm.
because capturing the key it's not sufficient for capturing the key challenges and needs of the industry sufficient. But what the experts are saying is something different, and they're actually questioning if this data is really valuable. They've got experts in retail asset protection that said, it's impossible for retailers to have any level of accuracy in shrink because by definition, it's ambiguous. And so for years, you've had this muddying data between what was internal shrink, meaning employees just stealing things, inventory loss, stuff falls off trucks all the time, and what the NRF has been really trying to fight, which is this organized retail crime, which is forever known as ORC. We always need a good acronym
Mm-hmm.
in the retail space. So when Retail Dive got Dateline style in 2023, they basically said the NRF was using an aggregate of all the inventory losses, not just theft,
Hmm.
as the total dollar impact for organized retail crime. And then what happens was the National Coalition of Law Enforcement in Retail, also called CLEAR, which is a whole other thing.
Huh.
House is clear, poltergeist reference. They started to use this data which is like $45 billion in losses due to organized retail crime in their studies. Then the NRF starts quoting that figure. And so it became this cyclical thing. And it was them
So
two
weird.
pointing at each other. Right.
Isn't John Travolta also clear?
He sure is. Yeah, he's very clear. So many things are clear, but not this data and clearly not this analysis because,
No.
now my head's kind of exploding because they're basically pointing it to each other to say, no, that figure came from you. No, that figure actually came from you.
Yeah.
And, the saga kind of continues to the point where this whole thing gets blown up. They retracted the figure from their 2023 report and kind of a under the rug type situation. Didn't really announce it that much, but had to redact it. And now they're not doing the report this year. However, it is not stopping the NRF from doubling down on this being their platform. You guys, October 24th, mark your calendars. It is Fight Retail Crime Day, and it is going to be hopping. We got storage.
Wow.
We got advocating for combating Organized Retail Crime Act. The big event, Rick, you ready for this?
I'm waiting.
All right. It's a webinar on the state of retail crime.
Ooh.
1 hour of action-packed insights. Probably not now since the report's not available. Set your clock and you're going to be blown away.
Nothing gets me more hot than a webinar.
Why did they ask you to be on it? Is really what I want to know.
I'm not sure. We could talk a lot. I think they've seen other episodes of our program railing on the NRF. That's probably why we missed the invite in our inbox.
We're blacklisted. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not getting that that gold ticket in the mail. So yeah, that's what's happening in Shrinkflation Nation. They have had to not make shrink a thing.
Yeah.
I
So
guess
it
my
sounds
question is is it gonna is this the end?
Yeah, it sounds like we're never gonna get this data again. And it's almost like they got embarrassed because they overstated it in the past, and the retailers are like, it's not actually that bad, and we can make some changes, beef up security, lock up some more things. I don't know, get rid of our self-checkouts, which seems to be like
Right.
self-checkout is basically like steal shit aisle at the
Yeah.
at your favorite retailer.
I mean, those cameras are not just so you make sure your hair looks good and your lipstick's on great. No, but are they really hitting it? I don't know.
Yeah, unclear. So shrink, no longer a thing, and we won't hear about it again.
We won't. So from shrinking to growing, you've got our next headline.
Yes, I do. And we're talking about Dave Clark, who was a former head of logistics for many years at Amazon. And I believe a colleague of our guest on the program in a different division. So he has raised $100 million for his new startup called Augur. And so Dave Clark has been on a little bit of a journey, some would say an educational tour, according to his own LinkedIn. Went through Flexport, was going to turn around Flexport as the CEO. Ryan Peterson famously hyped him up and then kicked him out the door. And so he was trying to figure out, what do I do next? And so he has a new startup in the supply chain planning field. So like helping mid-market and enterprise retailers with forecasting. It's going to suck in data from all these systems like inventory, demand. Like he's trying to reproduce the set of software he had at Amazon that they built internally, this end-to-end software. And he talked to a lot of retailers, and he found that mostly finance and supply chain planning professionals were all doing this in Excel. And so the solution is called Augur, which is, if you hadn't know, an auger is it's a drill. Kind of goes back to our drill analogy before.
Oh, it
And
all comes full
so
circle.
it comes full circle. And so he's raised $100 million. He has no software, no revenue, no customers, a few employees, and a big mountain ahead. Like, if you raise $100 million as a startup, doesn't it sort of like paint a big target on your back?
100%. Yeah. He's like is his mantra can't stop, won't stop. It's like,
Go big or go home.
Go big or go home, had these big dreams of and Flexport visions, a new era
Yeah.
as the turnaround CEO. And here he comes, blazing trails.
Yes.
New frontiers.
I've never worked with Dave Clark directly, but I noticed from many people that do, he is I would say, polarizing figure. There are folks that really are just sort of diehard Dave Clark fans, and then there are folks that are exactly other. You don't have a neutral opinion of Dave Clark, and so what I find is the reality is you can't deny the success of the Amazon Logistics Network, so you have to give him props on that. And he has a big vision for what this is going to be next. So we will see how does as the headline states, does this augur well for the future? And will we see this, when he starts working on the software, which we don't know when that is yet.
No, we don't. But it's hats off to him, because we got another story later. He's getting cash in an environment where it's not getting handed out like candy back in the day. So
it helps to be Dave Clark. So there you go.
It helps to be Dave Clark for sure. Well, in our stories of triumph, we have got another one for you, which is Walmart saying anything you can do, I can do better. And it is pretty interesting because for decades we've thought, who can really challenge Amazon? And I think initially when Walmart probably started on this journey with the marketplace, with logistics, with grocery, we probably had some question marks. I think at least I did, of like, were they too late?
Right.
Amazon's had such this lead, this foothold, and some new data came out that basically said, look, they are actually taking an advantage of being not a slower follower, not even a fast follower. They are becoming a real alternative for sellers seeking a fulfillment partner, really going after FBA's business. They've taken, they're about a 15% less expensive than what Amazon is charging through FBA. And really the kicker for Amazon is, for years, because they have had this level of competition, they've been able to raise fees because you're just locked into that ecosystem and you can't really do much about it as a seller.
Right.
And so if they're increasing fees 5% per year on FBA, but Walmart's less expensive. And now they've actually got this more viable alternative where they're starting to ship packages, whether it's for a Walmart order or not, a la the Amazon model. That is billions and billions of dollars less that Amazon is going to be making.
Hmm.
Again, your margin, their opportunity, it starts to erode with the Walmart team coming in town. So what do you think about that, Rick?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the question is how much off Walmart orders will be fulfilled during this using this network. And so I think that's really the question here, and that's gonna either hurt Amazon or help it. Ultimately, it's hard for me to believe that like Walmart is going to be replenishing into Amazon's network or be eligible for the Prime badge anytime soon. And so
Hmm.
as long as the Amazon marketplace is still like what 10x the volume
Yeah.
of Walmart, I don't think Amazon has anything to worry about anytime soon. It's more that it's more of a long-term trend. If there is slightly more margin going back to sellers on the Walmart marketplace, and then that's gonna make sure that Walmart keeps that selection that maybe
Right.
Amazon could lock up. And then over time, that's just kind of a tailwind for Walmart in the future so that it can keep growing. And Walmart is the fastest growing e-commerce site in the US outside of like Temu Shein right now. And
Yeah.
so that kind of tailwind is huge. And, unlike Target, who can never really figure out its marketplace, Walmart did. And Walmart marketplace is leading its e-commerce growth strategy. It's helping with ads, it's helping with fulfillment. And so it really is transforming their business model. So it's exciting to see how that is going to continue to evolve here.
Yeah, yeah. I guess my last word is, Amazon's not afraid to fight back. We saw that in with the whole Temu Shein. They cut fees on apparel. Be interesting to see. Do they take this or they retaliate?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon you know, has in the past several years has used FBA fees as sort of both carrots and sticks. There are sometimes they
Hmm.
have reduced fees on FBA. Um, Sometimes they have increased fees on FBA. Um, they introduced fees for overstocking. They've had fees for understocking. And so it's hard to run an Amazon business in case you hadn't noticed out there.
You
And
need to have
so,
it's like Goldilocks. You
yeah,
just need
exactly.
to get it just right.
Exactly. Amazon, having a real competitor is, I think, in every seller's best interest.
Yeah.
So, go shop at Sam Walton's namesake here.
Yeah. All right. Well, bring us home.
Yeah, our last story is talking about unicorns and the state of venture capital in the world. The story comes out of new data from PitchBook and another firm which is surveying the VC landscape and has found that there's almost like $2.4 trillion locked up in unicorns. And that
Mm,
now makes up like 40% of all venture investments is tied up in this small group of companies, which wouldn't seem like a big deal, except for the fact that most of this value has been locked up for 9 years.
wow.
And if you look at obviously VCs, ideally, it's kind of like on a 5 to 7 year timeline,
Yep.
maybe like worst case scenario, like an entire fund lasts 10 years. And so at the end of the day, you need other investors to come in and sort of refresh. And I think that is kind of like Stripe has been in that bucket, Flexport has been in that bucket. I don't think anyone believes that Stripe is going IPO soon.
No.
ShipBob, we've been waiting for their IPO. We've been told that they confidentially filed. They're pretty highly valued, though not as much as the other ones. What's really causing this problem, not just for unicorns, but for all startups, is really the fact that M&A, especially large mergers and acquisitions, have really slowed down, and which our guest probably has a viewpoint on since he works with a lot of small and mid-sized companies with M&A. And then second is um there just aren't that many IPOs.
No. And we talked about this last week, I believe. What's the incentive for someone to go IPO now in this environment where there's just so much scrutiny on profitability and bottom line? And so it probably actually stunts your growth
Yeah.
potential because you're now just always worried about what flows through to the EBITDA line and how you report on it. So it's interesting to see this new data, and also, some of those types of trends where basically, I think in 2023, it was a 37% decline for even North American startups in what they were able to raise across all the different stages. And to your point, it could be a symptom of like just dollars being locked up, and no one really, the competition on probably some of these attractive deals is high, but it's becoming more and more difficult for even startups to get funding unless you're Dave Clark.
Yeah, Dave Clark seems to have no issues, which is good if you're Dave Clark, or Elon Musk is kind of in the same bucket. He seems to be able
Yeah,
to raise money whenever he wants.
Midas touch.
What we see is a lot of these companies, fewer VCs are investing this year than in 3 years ago. Another stat that came out of the report is that there were 45% fewer number of investors investing in 2024 than in
Oh, wow.
2021, which is kind of big. And you kind of understand this. There's like a lot of new VCs that
Yeah.
came out of nowhere, similar to startups. As a result of COVID, everything was going up and to the right, particularly in digital. And so now it seems like, quote unquote, novice investors are a little bit on the sidelines because they've invested in the past and they can't get exits for anything they have. And so the only thing they have to do is like, let's fund our existing investments. We're not going to revalue them because we don't want to admit that their value could be less than
Yeah.
maybe than were 4 years ago. And so as a result, we kind of waited out. It's like waiting for the cash to run out, more or less.
Basically, yeah. And waiting for, I guess, the economy to turn around or get better. Trends are cyclical. Maybe there'll be another go for growth
Yeah.
moment,
Consumer's
but it's,
resilient, Jess. Come on. We're
yes,
resilient.
she is. Yes, she is. And shrink is a thing.
Yes.
So, all right, we ready to bring on our guest? I'd love for you to do the intros.
I'm excited. We have a guest here. It's an old friend from the past several years, Alykhan Sunderji. He is the managing attorney and founder of Sunder Legal. Um, his firm focuses primarily on small and mid-market M&A as a specialty and other topics. Why Ali is an interesting guest. He led the legal team at Amazon in fashion and all of Canada for many years. He originally hails from Vancouver, Canada, which gives him
Oh,
that Canadian connection, which
Canadian,
is
eh?
exciting. So yes, eh?
Hey.
And so we're excited to have Ali on. After he comes on, we're going to talk about how he gets started in retail. So I would love to welcome Alykhan Sunderji to the program.
Welcome.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. I've been following Rick for a long time.
Yay!
He is a legend in
He
the
is a
e-commerce
legend.
space, and this is a big get for me. I'm excited to be here.
We have a big get here. We have a big
Yeah.
exec from Amazon. You were like what, -2 degrees removed from the S team at Amazon? You know,
My main client was on the S team,
yes,
so had a lot of visibility into a lot of interesting things. And I'll tell you one thing that really caught my attention, Rick, was when you said that finally Amazon has a competitor. And I'll tell you, when you work at Amazon, it doesn't feel that way.
right,
It
Yeah,
feels like
I bet.
everybody is your competitor, and that
right,
we're actually not that big,
right.
and that everyone's coming for us. And so it's interesting to hear that perspective that someone's finally competing against us when it certainly doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a fun point. I think that's very like a very Jeff Bezos like mindset where it's
Yeah.
day zero. The whole world could take us down. We don't. Our position isn't sure. So I'll just start out with you. Like at Amazon, is it day one or is it day 4?
I think that there is an intense pressure to stay as day one. Increasingly, I hear from folks, longtime Amazonians, who do say it feels like day two. And,
Mhm.
Rick, I actually commented on a LinkedIn post of yours the other day
Yep.
when they were talking about return to office. And I said, look, this is actually great. This is what
Uh-huh.
a lot of long-term Amazonians want. They
Hmm.
feel that the culture has been lost during the pandemic.
Hmm.
That,
Mm.
when I started there 10 years ago, there were stickers everywhere that said, we're not Microsoft. If you
Wow.
want to work at a country club, go across the lake. And it feels like a lot of the new people don't have that mental model. And, I made that comment. It wasn't popular, I think, with the greater world. I can't tell you how many Amazonians liked it, messaged me, whatever, and said, I totally agree. So I think that actually what Andy Jassy is doing is a good thing, and he's taking us back to the day one mentality. I think getting everybody, I know it's not popular.
No,
but
that's
getting
great. We
everyone in
love
the
to have
office-
controversy here in the program, so we want to hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, I think it's important. Get everyone in there. That's how you spread the culture. And, Amazon has never been afraid of passing on talent in order
Yeah.
to ensure it has people who align with its leadership principles. And
Mm.
so if people don't want to come to the office, that's fine. Amazon's also fine with that.
Yeah. Move on. So this was like an "Oh, Captain, my Captain" moment. People were really the
It
core
depends on who you are,
Amazonians were
right?
pretty
I
excited
think,
about it.
some people would say that if you're a longtime Amazonian, maybe there's something wrong with you. Like why do you like that environment so much? But look, it's been the secret of the company's success for a long time. And as an
Yeah.
investor, I'm thumbs up.
You're
Yeah.
happy. Yeah.
So I'm happy to have you on the program for a number of reasons. As you had exited Amazon and starting to talk about forming Sunder, you and I had a number of chats. The process of going out on your own, and I think you being able to take a lot of what you learned at Amazon and put into this. What are some of the things that you've taken away from your time at Amazon that kind of goes into your current law firm?
Amazon is a phenomenal place where it trains people really well. And I think their
Mhm.
legal department is probably one of the best in the world. I think when you go into business yourself, you have to look at what is that you have to offer, but what is the market that, aligns with what you have.
Right.
Yeah.
So my market is a little bit different than what I worked at Amazon. I work with
Mhm.
smaller businesses.
Mhm.
I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm not doing multi-billion-dollar deals. We do stuff in the $5 to $50 million range.
Mhm.
But I'll
Mhm.
tell you, the people who are selling a $20 or $30 million company are a lot like the entrepreneurs who run Amazon. They
Mm.
want you to speak to them in simple, straightforward language. They don't want legalistic talk. They want to know, how does
Mhm.
this affect me? What is
Mhm.
this bottom line impact to my business?
Right.
And so I think just the way we worked with clients at Amazon works really well with entrepreneurs. The second thing is really just how to market and sell your business.
Hmm.
I think I told Rick this a long time ago. I noticed when I was at Amazon, the number one product often, on search, often didn't get there overnight, right? They had to
Yeah.
buy advertising. They
Yeah.
had to get noticed. They had
Wait
to
for
market
earned media.
and one of the things I learned when I went into this space in sort of the small law firm space is a lot of small law firm owners don't really understand that, right? They don't understand the value of marketing, of advertising.
Yeah.
And so, I was in-house for 10 years. I didn't have a book of business. Like today, I have a significant book, and it's really from, smart marketing, smart
Yeah.
advertising, getting in front of my customers. And really, I learned all of that at Amazon. And lastly, just sort of, being customer friendly, being customer obsessed, looking at what pain points are in my space and addressing them, flat fees, estimates, no sort of ambiguity about what you're getting for your services. And so I
Yeah.
think that's resonated with our clients, and things are going well.
That's awesome. So I'm excited to hear that. I would love to kick off the conversation a little bit with regard to a topic that's near and dear, particularly to a lot of big brands in the audience, which is privacy.
Mm.
And it seems like an area that is becoming increasingly complex in the US. I think with the number of states that are involved and the lack of federal framework for it, it doesn't seem like we're going the route of the EU where like everyone is going to have the same kind of standards. I was doing some research and there are now 20 states that have different types of privacy regulations, and that does not seem to be slowing down, similar to tax law. So it used to be like, okay, you had to worry about the EU, the rest of the US, and then California. And
Right.
it seems like that has changed significantly. And so I wonder if you can help us unpack what's the state of play in privacy, and then how is it affecting kind of merchants and e-commerce right now?
Yeah. So privacy is, honestly, privacy is not my strong expertise
Oh, come
these
on.
days.
You're a lawyer. You're an
Yeah.
expert in privacy.
Well, this is the way, big companies like Amazon deal with it is, frankly, um, you cannot really build your business around 50 different state laws, right?
Mm.
And you have to think well in advance when you're building these tools. From idea to launch sometimes takes 2 to 3 years. And so you basically identify what is the most restrictive law out there, and you build towards that. And so
Mhm.
whether it's California or the EU, you kind of see what's coming down the pipe. And, a lot of these states do have similar laws, but, one area we're seeing a lot of, movement is, biometrics.
Mm.
Yeah.
What are the laws around, facial recognition, especially in fashion, taking images of the body, providing you with a virtual try-on or size recommendations. Like that is clearly a very pro-customer feature. But how do you build that in a way that complies with privacy laws, doesn't freak people out, but also is scalable? So, if somebody takes a photo, naked, what happens with that photo? How does it get ingested into your system? How do you cull it so that you don't have that data? How many people do you put in the loop? So it's a complex space, but the only way you can simplify it, again, is to sort of identify those that have the highest standards and build towards them.
Yeah. P.S. I want to meet these people who are willing to take a naked photo of themselves and submit it to a retailer's website. Because
it's honestly crazy. Like Amazon launched this thing, a long time ago. You put it in your closet. It would take photos of all your clothes, and you build a virtual closet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people do bizarre things. Let me tell you.
That is the holy grail. That's like the Alicia Silverstone Clueless moment, right? Where she gets like the digitized. It's pretty
But I mean, it's coming sooner than you think.
Yeah. That's amazing. So when you talk about the privacy, the other thing that we wanted to, yes, we do not need those photos here. The other thing we wanted to unpack with you was just what's happening in all the antitrust conversations. And you've got like the Kroger Albertsons, you have, at one point, Microsoft was really this like big monopoly that had so much really adjudication around it. And so just curious, like what you see in this landscape, and can retailers survive?
Let's just start simple. Like why is it being challenged at
near
all?
and dear to my heart. The first thing I think it's important to bear in mind is that, for those, I know your audience is very sophisticated, and they all know that there's been a significant change in antitrust scrutiny under the Biden administration. And, Rick alluded to it earlier. If you're a startup now, it's very tough to exit in M&A. Amazon tried to buy iRobot. FTC killed the deal. iRobot now, laying off 30% of its staff. Spirit Airlines, going under, tried to merge with Frontier. FTC killed it. Now will Spirit survive? Unclear. Right. So there is a lot of chilling effect in the market for transactions that could actually be beneficial for the consumer. And I think it's a challenge. And that's why you see a lot of donors to Kamala Harris, like Mark Cuban, saying, hey, is Lina Khan, the chair of the FTC, the right person? And, as an attorney, it's so interesting because Lina Khan only graduated from law school 5 years ago. She's not even that senior. She wouldn't even get a job as an entry-level lawyer at Google or Amazon, yet she's running the key regulator. Now, she's a very brilliant, fantastic person, but, I think you see some of this lack of private sector experience, not only, in her comments, but in the FTC. And I think we're seeing the real world impact of that. So I'm happy to go through some of the cases, but, I think, anybody who's familiar with these markets knows that there is a chilling effect, that it is affecting companies. And I'll make one more comment, which is that, you mentioned Microsoft. Yeah. Microsoft is a real cautionary tale. Because even if you can fight these things in the court and limit, the remedies that the government is seeking, it is a huge distraction, right? You are not only in court, but every time one of your teams comes up with an idea that may just sound incredibly, customer friendly. Think about how many now new layers of review and questions it undergoes because it might be seen as anti-competitive. So it's actually, in my opinion, kind of hurting innovation right now.
That was actually a question we wanted to ask you based on what you're saying is like, does it create a whole level of complexity in just how people think? Does it create fear in execution on maybe some of these opportunities? Like, do they get factored in decision making in a real way?
Absolutely, right. You always have to think about how regulators and customers will perceive something. And increasingly, even if things are extremely positive, the reaction could be very negative. And so you really have to think through all of the possible reactions that might come up, how you'll respond to them. And then even that process can sometimes be used against you. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal recently about how Amazon had some secret operation to sort of benchmark, what other folks were doing in the marketplace. And
by the way,
I
which
guess
it's done for since it was founded.
pardon me?
I mean, which it's done since it's
Yeah,
founded. I mean, it's
but
like
they created another company called Big River, and this was all in the Wall Street
Yeah.
Journal, which is funny because it's like Amazon. So they created
Right.
Big River, and they signed up.
Amazon.
They signed up to be a seller on Walmart. They
Right.
actually ship
Yes.
product,
Yeah.
and it's very common at companies to create hey, what will happen if somebody finds out? What are our press responses?
Right.
And even that was held up as can you believe how evil these guys are? They did this thing to check out their competitors, and they even had this PR document on how to respond to questions. This is totally basic stuff.
It's actually good business. I mean, when we were at Channel Advisor, we would go and act like a seller so that we could hear the sales pitch of our competitor. I mean, isn't this just typical espionage that you should do?
Well, actually, the most interesting thing is I think a lot of Amazonians were probably surprised to hear it exists because, Rick alluded to it earlier. Sort of, it's very deep in the DNA of Amazon that we start with the customer and we don't look at competitors. And so, I suspect 95% of Amazonians never saw any data on competitors.
Yeah.
And generally, as the DNA of the company is not even to talk about competitors. It is really just to talk about what helps the customer and what makes the experience better. So, it's a very interesting project. But yes, you're right, Jess. It does slow things down. It does hurt innovation. It's good that we have competition regulators, but I personally think the pendulum has swung a little bit far to one side.
I mean, it's like shots fired on this program with Lena Khan. I mean, Ali, you're coming out swinging for the FTC. It's interesting.
I tried to tag her in my post for this, and
how did that work out for you?
Tag Lena Khan on LinkedIn. It's a blocked account, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, luckily she can't revoke your law license, so you're good
No,
there.
no, I don't think so.
And I think the other side of this is, you're right about the innovation angle, and I think where we're talking about Amazon and focused on the competition versus the customer, I think Amazon's focus on the competition actually comes from the customer. Obviously, in a retail, consumer is very price conscious, and they have a lot of options, and so they're pricing. So if you're on the pricing team at Amazon, absolutely, you have to be thinking about the competition 24/7 because the consumer has options. And Jeff Bezos is famous for saying the consumer is divinely discontent. Like what you have today could change tomorrow. And if another one comes down, to use a statement from Daniel Day-Lewis, and there will be blood, they could drink your milkshake. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is if I'm getting too legalistic here, tell me, but that is actually one of the most interesting things about the FTC case against Amazon, which is that the paper that Lena Khan famously wrote in law school about Amazon claimed that they were using lower prices and their scale to keep competitors out of the market. But if you read the FTC case, it's the exact opposite argument, that they use restrictive contracts to keep prices high.
Prices up.
Yeah, and keep sellers off of other platforms. And so, is it that they keep prices high? Is it they keep prices low? And as a former Amazonian, I'll tell you something. There is nothing more important to that company than sharp pricing. It is it is.
It was on the flywheel. It was on the flywheel.
So I find the whole case very fascinating. I can't wait to see where it goes. But I'll tell you, knowing the Amazon legal team, they are not going to stop trying to invent on behalf of the customer because they saw what happened to Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
They saw that Microsoft basically took 10 years off, and it took them 20 years to sort of get back to where they were, and nobody wants that to happen. And so, whether it's Amazon or our great startup ecosystem in the United States, it's all about taking risk, right? There's so many laws in the books. There's nobody who can comply with all of them. And I think the successful, one of the things that makes America a great place is that people do take that risk. and they succeed sometimes, right? You look at the
Right.
great things like Uber, Airbnb. Those folks took risk, they broke some laws, and we have new industries. And I
Yeah.
think we're all better off for it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And one other question I had is, do you feel like ways around this? I think we're starting to see it a little bit. Is instead of having like a acquisition or M&A, do you have like private equity firms starting to build these like customer life cycle journeys where, maybe you buy a Michaels or you buy another company and you try to put them together, but not really in a strategic partnership way, or the store within a store concepts that you're seeing like Ulta in Target or Sephora. So is that the workaround that you might find in a scenario of, hey, we don't want to mess with this antitrust situation, but instead we're going to like partner up and team up together?
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Which is that people want to do business together, and they're going to find a way to do it based on the existing rules. You
Yep.
can't predict what the FTC will come after, but I wasn't involved in this deal, but I recently saw, Amazon did a deal with Saks, and it was framed as like an AWS deal and some logistics help. I'm actually really interested to see what happens there, because I suspect that there's actually a larger tie-up, and we may actually end up seeing a Saks store on Amazon.
On
Amazon
Amazon.
launched a
Yeah.
luxury store recently.
Yeah, they
Right.
did.
And
Yeah.
I was part of that launch, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some action there or some other deal happening
Yeah.
to get that selection on the website or to build some other store. But I think you've absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you saw this week, Authentic Brands Group has started a new arm called Authentic Luxury Group. They're doing like real estate and hotels, and like any way that Jamie Salter, the head of ABG, can make money, they will. And if Amazon is going to pay him to put Saks on the store, I mean, look, I think when Amazon entered fashion, it was almost like ridiculed. Like, no offense,
Yes.
like,
No,
It was.
Amazon
It
is the
was.
number one fashion and apparel retailer in
that's what
America.
I'm saying. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's unbelievable.
But the thing
Yeah.
is like most people in America aren't buying, a Xenia blazer or,
Except for Jess. Come on.
but what they are buying is like sweatpants, athleisure, socks,
Socks.
right? That's where
You gotta have
there's a lot
those.
of money in
Gotta
there.
have those Hanes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a big market segment, and luxury is one of the last, I think, that they have to work with. But, customers just have to get comfortable with it. But luxury is a tough market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to switch gears and talk a little bit about Albertsons and Kroger, because it just seems like this is a situation where you have two pretty big companies. Neither of them cover all the United States. It doesn't create a monopoly. And it's unclear how is it anti-competitive to achieve a little bit more scale. And so, like, what is the justification and what is the hope for like large scale M&A kind of going forward based on this case?
This one reminds me a lot of what we just mentioned, which was the Spirit Airlines Frontier deal.
Mhm.
And when you do a competition analysis, you have to look at the market and say, what market are we looking at,
Mm,
and how will it affect the customer? And take Subway sandwiches and Jimmy John's, right? We both know they compete in the sandwich market,
right.
but they also compete in the fast casual market, but they
Right.
also compete in the dining market. And so when you are a competition regulator, you have to ask yourself, what is the most relevant market here? And I think Albertsons and Kroger's, in a way, there's some politics behind it. And, it's actually a big issue in Washington State, where there's an election right now where the AG is running for governor. And he brings this up all the time, that he sued the deal. And it's because people look outside and they see these brands, right up the street or down the street from each other. And mentally it sounds right. Hey, if these two stores merge, like,
Right.
there's going to be no competition in my neighborhood for brick and mortar, grocery.
Right.
And so that sounds right. And, you're like, actually, maybe Lina Khan is on the right track here. But I think the bigger issue is that these brands are actually competing with, Walmart, Amazon, Costco. And when you look at the FTC analysis, they don't include those brands. And so while I think that this argument is compelling, I think in the long run, it may actually hurt competition, because we will not have a strong brick and mortar player who can compete against the Walmarts, the Amazons, the
Yeah.
Costcos. And so
Yeah.
it's a tough one, I think, for the FTC, but perhaps there's some middle ground remedy, like, store closures or sales rather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea you would have to close stores to satisfy the
Well,
FTC is a little unbelievable.
well, this one is interesting too, because, and this is why it's so important, what people are putting, what your employees actually think. Because the tough thing that FTC will have with Amazon is Amazonians really, because they're so customer friendly, there'll be very few like smoking gun emails that say, hey, let's do this to raise prices and take advantage
Yeah.
of the customer.
You've trained the employees too well to do that, Ali.
Well, I mean, I haven't trained anybody. That's just the way the business works, right? That is the mental model of the business. Whereas I don't think that is the same at Kroger's and Albertson. I don't know if the folks who work there were as disciplined in their communication. And I
Probably
think we're already
not.
starting to see some of these, problematic communications.
Yeah. So is the moral of the story that, and we're taking away today, it's Lena's world and we're just living in it?
I mean, at least for the next few months, let's see what happens with the election. Anything could happen.
Yeah.
It's an interesting place where Democrats and Republicans seem united about destroying big M&A, whereas they're not united on other things, in the world. So it's hard to understand sort of what the situation is there. Finally, I think the last topic we'll end on is Google. It seems like there's been a lot of rumblings about trying to take down Google from an online search market. I'm kind of remembering Amazon over the years. People think like, oh, Amazon a monopoly in e-commerce, and all of a sudden, like, Amazon behind the scenes like does some like very sneaky things from my point of view, and you can like blink twice to say like you don't need to have any public commentary on this, Ali. I wouldn't want to put you on the record, but like Amazon used to be an e-commerce site, and now Amazon calls itself stores.
Yeah.
And so to your point on domain, like we're not a monopoly in the e-com market. We're a tiny small player in the retail market of the world. Like we're like less than
only 4% of the global retail marketplace.
Exactly. We're so small. Why would you come after tiny old Amazon?
For us.
And so Google, it seems like I even went on Google Gemini. It's like, what is Google? And basically it just says like, it's the monopoly search provider. So like, is there like Google's own freaking chatbot says it's a monopoly. And so it seems like the government has an open and shut case here, doesn't it?
Well, first of all, and I know we're trying to get off Amazon, but the reason I think the reason they've started using stores is a lot of the things that they were saying about Amazon just seem so foreign, and it's like, oh, these are bad guys, selling private brands, but every store sells private brands, and it's sort of a way to humanize them and say, look, they're not unusual, they're just like everything else. But moving to Google, look, being a monopoly actually under the law is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong is if you're a monopoly and you abuse that position.
Exactly.
And the claim here, now there's several cases on Google right now. The one you're talking about, the Justice Department case, where they recently kind of lost, was, they are using their dominant position and paying other providers like Apple to make their search the default, which gives them an unfair advantage, and therefore they've provided a worse experience and take advantage of other monopoly things like their search business. I mean, this one's going to be interesting. It kind of goes back to that old comment I said, which is like, they're going to litigate it, to the end of the earth. I don't think that the remedies are going to be to break up Google. It just seems too extreme based on what the issue was here, which was just basically paying Apple to be on the iPhone. It's much easier just to kill that deal. But I think the bigger issue is that it's going to stifle innovation for a long time. I don't know if they have the risk-taking culture or strong leadership that a Meta or an Amazon has. And I think it will be a challenge for them over the coming years to continue to innovate.
Yeah, I actually had a question that might feel a little controversial, but I'm just curious on your take. You look at these cases, and especially with a large-scale organization like Google or Amazon, yes, there is like legal battles and things that they're tied up in. It can be a distraction. are the fees and the remedies really that scary? Is it a real deterrent? So like in the Amazon case in Ireland, props to our producer, Vinny, they owed $13 billion. It was held in escrow while the case was pending. They had conservatively $4.5 billion in interest while they waited. Does it really make that much of a difference? Is this just a kind of a little speed bump?
Look, I think that if you're running one of these companies, you have to fight as hard as you can to sort of stop this stuff and wait it out. And I think the timeline of these cases is so long that the politics can change quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps if a different president was in power and was making these cases, people would say, "Oh, this is political,"
Mm-hmm.
and it would have a different ring to it.
Yeah.
And so I do think that in the long run, these companies have really no choice but to sort of fight it out, do what they can to stay alive. And ultimately, I do think that you will need strong leadership to push through,
Yep.
push your team to continue taking risks. And I do think we've seen that at, Microsoft under Satya,
Yep.
Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. So I do think there are a lot of questions about Google's leadership right now,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're going to continue handling this. And it'll be an interesting one. I don't really have an answer on that, but I think you're right. You kind of have to keep fighting.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a case where the corporations can either wait out or delay or defer or just pay a slap on the wrist. I mean, I kind of grew up watching the dominance of Microsoft, and then, the case, by the time the case was over, Microsoft had already lost its monopoly on the internet browser, which was what the case was about originally. And so the market changed. Not only do politics change so quickly, the market changes so quickly, and the domain shift. And so what was the legal domain at the beginning of the case, 5 years later, you have the internet sprung up, right?
No,
It blew
it was
up.
like mobile came about, right? So it was
100%.
all this fight about PC browsers, and 5-7 years later, it was irrelevant. But that's the point, is that Microsoft was handcuffed and like couldn't compete, and they were slowed down, couldn't innovate, and basically lost that race. And so while the court penalties may not have been punitive, the whole process was punitive. And so in a way it's working because kind of stopped them from competing entirely.
No, for sure. I definitely think that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you are so brilliant. I've learned a ton.
I hope this was good. I hope
Oh
I
my
did
gosh,
okay.
it is an amazing show. But look, it is the weekend and we like to chill. And so just kind of as we roll off, what is your favorite part, assuming you have one, in A Few Good Men?
Oh, obviously there's the all the courtroom drama.
Yeah.
It's actually one of my favorite movies. So
Can you do the voice?
So many scenes.
Yeah.
And I actually, my wife had never seen it, and we recently watched it like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of favorite scenes, but I actually really like the character arc of Tom Cruise, where he's this guy that was always settling his cases.
Yes.
And he saw what a bogus case this was. And actually, my favorite scene was when they're interviewing Jack Nicholson, when they're eating lunch, and you see Tom Cruise knows what's happening. And he's like, all right, we're going to leave. See you guys later.
Right. We're out.
Demi Moore asked that last question, and he gets so upset later. He's like, and in a way, it sort of reflects the strategy of law, which is that you kind of have to be very strategic, forward thinking, think ahead. And that scene sort of encapsulated that like, you have to be very thoughtful about all of your actions when you're negotiating or questioning somebody. So I think phenomenal movie. What's your favorite scene?
I mean, I think all of the characters were amazing, and it's probably cliche, but I do love the whole banter back and forth in that last courtroom scene. Yeah. And he's, I've just got one more question. And then they start to really get into it. Like Jack Nicholson thinks he's out,
Yeah.
And, and he's like, I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
There you
go.
That's
my
it's
voice.
Such a great movie.
Yeah, it's so good. So I thank you for sharing that with us and indulging me in my
And I'll say for the viewers out there, the other great movie that really nails it is My Cousin Vinny. I think it is.
Oh my God, yes.
It is actually held up as one of the best legal movies.
No, it's great.
Very accurate, but very dramatic. So
it's like
so good. So
do I have permission to treat this as a hostile witness?
Yeah, the two Utes.
Yeah, and the mud down there is very different apparently.
Yeah,
it's very different. Your tires,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Marissa Tomei was brilliant. Yeah,
So
you can't do it without positive traction.
Positive traction. I love it.
This is great. Well, it's been amazing to have you on the show, Allie. This is everything that we signed up for. So I hope you have your dancing shoes on.
Yeah,
thank you so much for having me. You guys are famous in the community.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing.
Cool.
Thank
you so much for coming in.
Show us your dance moves.
Bye.